And welcome everybody. Welcome to the webinar. This is the Instructional Design and Learnings webinar, and today we have a really great program. I got to see some of the program in the rehearsal, and it just is super entertaining and great. It is your brain on PowerPoint, and our speaker is Robert Hershenow. And if you're not familiar with him, you are really going to like what you hear. Robert is a past co-manager of the Instructional Design and Learning SIG, and how do you phrase it, Robert? You're the PowerPoint whisperer or PowerPoint guru, definitely a PowerPoint expert. He has powers far beyond those of mortal men, and he's going to share them with us. And with that, I am going to take a step back. And Robert, my job is to watch the chat window and just to support you in any way that I can. So I'm just going to kick it off to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for all the kind words. I had to stop and remember, but I've called myself a PowerPoint evangelist. I think maybe that's what you're thinking of. Because I really love the program and I have a lot of fun with it. And I think that most of us, me included, could do a better job with it. We've certainly seen lots of presentations that we wish we didn't have to sit through. And it's got so much potential that I'm excited to be able to share it. And I'm excited to be here. So let's get going. Can everybody see my black screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And some letters on it now?
Yes.
It should say, what if? Good, is everybody on board here? I guess silence is agreement. So
we are on board, Captain.
Imagine, so here we go. Imagine if you could create and deliver presentations that were automatically engaging, persuasive, and memorable. Well, you can. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Robert Hershenow, and this is Your Brain on PowerPoint, Better Presentations Through Science. Today, I'm going to talk about how we can use cognitive science to create and deliver more effective presentations. And I guess everybody can hear me. Looks good on this end, so here we go. This is a picture of a neuron. As you may know, it's the cell in your brain that does the work. It's a little electrical switch, a tiny component of the huge network of little electrical switches, many, many neurons inside your brain. They're connected in all kinds of different ways, and they do different things. How many are there? Well, you've probably heard 100 billion, about the same as the number of stars in the Milky Way. Up until recently, that's the number I knew. Scientists said it, and people repeated it and published it in books and papers. It was widely accepted and is still, but as it turns out, it's wrong. Because a few years ago, people developed some better ways to measure things, and they arrived at better numbers, at least more accurate numbers, more like 86 billion neurons in our heads. That's not too far off, I guess. But somewhere between 200 and 400 billion stars out there. I guess it's easier to measure neurons than it is to measure stars accurately. But these are the numbers you'll hear today from the people who pay attention to the most current information. Most of us have other things to do, so the myth of 100 billion lives on. It is a rather charming piece of misinformation. It's a loose estimate that helped us get our heads around this inconceivable idea. And so we like it. And we'll continue to believe it and repeat it until we learn differently. And this little story is an example of how misinformation can enter the mainstream and stick. And it's part of what we're up against when we try to communicate with an audience with a presentation. People have their own ideas. So what can we do? My rule number one, if I want to reach people, I feel like I have to give them what they want, or something like they might think they want. Sometimes they don't want what I'm giving. Maybe they don't care about it. Maybe they don't even want to be there. They've got work to do. So to engage them, I need to connect initially on some other level to get my foot in the door, as we say. And one way to do that is through entertainment. People love to be entertained. So good presentations often begin with a story or a joke as an icebreaker, because once we break the ice, remarkable things can begin to happen. Was that cheesy, the way I broke the ice there? That's entertainment.
We're
Okay.
supposed to laugh, but we were muted.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's good.
We're
I feel
laughing.
like I'm in a... Thank you. But we learn what we want to learn, right? And as I said, we've all got our own ideas. Most of us want to hear from people who think like we do, and we tend to turn away from those who don't. We might also tend to hear things the way we want them to be rather than as they are. As you probably know, this is called confirmation bias, because we're each biased toward whatever confirms our own ideas and beliefs. It makes us feel good to hear that. Confirmation bias can be problematic. It can prevent people from hearing each other, or can tempt people to spread misinformation. And if you were on the webinar last month, you'll understand the link here between the kitty and the ninja. But confirmation bias can also be used for good, because everything starts with relationships. And relationships begin with simple attraction, either to a person or to something they do or say or represent. In fact, if we like anything about someone, even their scent, we're likely to give them a chance. If we like them, we will pay attention. And that's why the icebreaker is so important. It gives people a chance to like something about you. And of course, audience analysis can be a big help here too. If you know what your audience wants, what they need, and how they like to do things, and if your presentation gets right up and speaks to some of those things right up front, you will get their attention and be on your way to gaining their respect. So, relationships matter. Give them what they want. Make the connection by talking to people. Do that audience analysis if it makes sense. Get out there and find out who they are and what they want. And then when you get there, tell a story or a joke to break the ice. Try to make it relevant to your talk, because that will make it much more effective. And now on to the presentation. Rule number 2 is that better attention means better learning, which is a no-brainer, right? So basically it means don't be boring as much as possible. And in context, if you can keep on entertaining your audience, you will better keep their attention. I say in context because you do have to be careful sometimes. One of my most powerful memories is of a presentation I did some years ago to a new management team at the company where I worked. And each of us were asked to do a little thing about our share of the department. And I thought I'd be humorous and lighten things up, because it was a really stressful time for everyone. A lot of managers were gone and new managers had come in. Nobody knew anybody else. And my little presentation just totally bombed. These guys were so serious and nobody would laugh at anything. I kind of felt like an idiot. And I never did all that well in that group. for a long time after that. So that's why I say in context. But if you can keep on entertaining your audience, you will better keep their attention. Since multitasking is a myth, but people keep gushing over it, we have to shut it down. We all know this, right? That multitasking doesn't work. I mean, everyone keeps talking about it, but the brain is a sequential processor. It's very fast, so it might seem like we're doing two things at once, but we're not. We're just switching back and forth between them. And the research has shown over and over again that when you're interrupted, it takes 50% longer to complete a task on average. And you will make up to 50% more errors. So we can look at this in two different ways. You know, as far as the audience goes, ask them to silence their phones. And if you haven't silenced your phone, turn it off even if you can. Please do so. See, I'm not following my own advice here again. Also, if you have a handout for a conference or a webinar or something, maybe think about distributing it after the thing is over so that people don't sit there with it on the table or in their lap reading it instead of listening to you. And the other side of the multitasking thing is when you are researching and writing your presentation, it really helps to put yourself in a quiet space, turn the phone off if you can, shut the door, and you'll get a lot more done. Again, probably a no-brainer, but it works for me.
So we have a message from Jamie in the chat. That she makes the remark that what Robert says about handouts dovetails nicely with the previous month's presentation from Chuck Campbell. He did a webinar on handouts. So,
thanks, Jamie. That's where I got it. No, handouts are really a bugaboo, and they've always bothered me because sometimes they're good to have if you're, you know, if it's an interactive discussion and you need a place to write things down, or maybe, you know, draw a chart or draw a picture or something. But a lot of the time, if it's just a list of facts or copies of the slides, it can really be a distraction. So I was happy to hear Chuck say that maybe sometimes it's not such a good idea to make sure people have it right up front. What is a good idea, though, is to get some emotional arousal going. The stuff that we really remember is the stuff that got us cranked up. Think about the last exciting thing you did, like the last time you drove a racing car, or, you know, whatever. We remember the exciting things, and if you think back on something like that, you might realize that you remember all kinds of detail. So, oftentimes those are really vivid memories. So if you can arouse some emotion in your presentation audience, get people excited about something, make them laugh even, it will build better memories for them. One way to do that is to use images wherever you can instead of text. Chuck talked about this last month as well. You know, we've all seen the presentations that are just a screen full of text. I'm not even going to show you one because it is upsetting. Of course, that might make it good. That might be good because it's an emotional response. But one fact that always amazes me is that 50% of the energy that our brains consume is used to process visual information. Half of what our brain does is dealing with what comes in through our eyes. And that's not reading. Reading is a whole different thing. So John Medina, the author of a great book called Brain Rules, which I'll send you a link to later, said this: vision trumps everything else. And if you can show a picture and talk about it, you can get a whole lot farther than if you just show the picture or if you just show the words. Now, my advice is to avoid dull stock photos, which are maybe cute, but they're boring. And instead, find some interesting pictures and use them if you can. Again, context appropriate, but I think edgy gets attention, and attention makes emotion, and emotion builds memory. That's just the way the brain works. And I wonder if this lady is holding her own arm, or is that somebody else's arm? I don't know.
Robert.
Here's something that's really interesting. Nobody knows why it works this way, but everybody's brain pretty much does the same thing. You've got about 10 minutes in your presentation or in your class or in your movie or in your song or whatever before your audience begins to nod off. The research consistently supports this. And students will tell you this in school too. So I like to think that a presentation like this one may not have this problem because it's dynamic and I have a lot of leeway to keep it snappy. But you know, if you're presenting the quarterly financial report or something, that's a different story. So keep that in mind, and then at least every 10 minutes or so, do something to wake them up. Maybe not pull a fire alarm. No, I'm just kidding. That's not a good idea. But every 10 minutes, 10, 20, 30 is the time in your presentation where emotional arousal can really do the trick. So do something there.
Robert,
Even it can be simple. Yes.
we have a question in the chat box. I don't know if you can see it. It's from Anne. And she asks, is the 10-minute rule the same for readers of written communication?
That's a good question. I would think that maybe it is. And you know, thinking about different things, I'm just riffing on this because I don't know, but I think if you know the difference between reading a novel that really grips you and a textbook that you have to read, that you're just plowing through, thinking back, I think that might not be too far off. You know, and you might just have to get up and walk around a little bit and come back, and after you've recharged yourself, tell yourself a story.
Get yourself.
I can't see much of the chat box here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, Anne says
I have
thanks.
a very small chat window. Thanks. You're welcome, Anne. Now I see that you said thanks. There it is. Okay, I'll try to stay at the bottom of the chat window. And thanks, Vicki, for giving me the heads up. So here's the storyteller again. You know, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just something to wake people up. It helps a lot, as I think I said before, if the story or joke that you tell is somewhat relevant to the content of your presentation, so that your audience doesn't get confused or think you're stalling. One guy said that he would just tell jokes and stuff, and one day somebody came up to him after the presentation and said they were upset because he'd wasted so much of their time just telling stupid jokes instead of giving them information. So relevance is maybe important. So for better attention and better learning, no multitasking, develop some emotion-rich content. You know, multi-sensory content works best, a picture and words. We'll look at that again in a minute. And then use some of that emotion-rich content at least every 10 minutes to keep things moving. Now here are a few interesting things about memory. I've lost my place. And the inputs from each of our 5 senses are actually processed in different parts of the brain. This is one of the things that scientists have found out a lot more about in the last few years. You know, with the advent of these amazing scanning machines, MRI and CAT scanners and stuff, they can actually watch the brain operating. They can see parts of the brain lighting up, firing as certain things happen. They've never been able to do this before, at least not in a normal, healthy person. So they've discovered that there are millions of little specialized places in the brain that do different things. Some process touch, some process sight, some process smell. So when you experience something and make a memory out of it, those memories are actually stored in multiple locations as well. And when we want to recall them, our brains reassemble them for retrieval, which can cause some interesting things to happen, as we'll see in a minute. But our senses are designed to work together. That's the way we've evolved. So multisensory input creates stronger memories. The richer the input, the better the learning experience. Up to a point, if the brain has to work harder to process an input, it actually creates a stronger memory. It likes to be able to connect things. And so if we give it a number of different things to connect, to build a memory, it does a better job. So while a picture is really worth 1,000 words, narration and pictures together are better still. And believe it or not, if you can add smell, the strength of the memory increases exponentially. And this is kind of mysterious. People think that maybe this is because smells are processed in a completely different part of the brain than all the other senses. And maybe there's some more power there. So this is really intriguing to me. I don't know, maybe smell-o-vision for PowerPoint is something for Microsoft or somebody to work on. I think it would be cool to be able to add that, or it might be really gross. I don't know.
Bacon's good.
Bacon's good. Bacon's
Yeah.
always good. And you know, the smell of bacon is even better than a picture of bacon, if you think about it. Another thing about building memories, it seems that the brain is better at, the brain needs meaning before it can really process detail. And this might make sense to you if you think about it a little bit. It did to me. If you're just trying to absorb a whole bunch of details about something, but you don't really know what they're for, it's hard to get a grip on them. So if you're building a presentation about some highly detailed thing, make sure you put together a framework for it before dumping all this detail on your audience, like I may not have done myself today. I'm just giving you a whole pile of stuff here. The other thing about this is that that the first few seconds of input are the most crucial as far as creating memory goes. The thing we're going to remember, the thing that makes the spark, is the first thing we see, the first thing we hear. So it's a good practice to be able to jump right into the biggest, most meaty part of it and then get to the little stuff later, rather than working your way up to it. I don't know too much about this, but it's intriguing to me, and I want to do some more research, but it really looks like it makes sense and is beneficial to focus on the meaning first and make that clear. And then that gives the details that you're going to give later some context to connect to. And how are we doing? Any questions or anything?
Okay, so Kelly wanted to know, how can we incorporate the smell? That's what she wants to know.
Well, yeah, I'd like to know that too. That's intriguing. I think back in the 50s, there was a thing called smell-o-vision that some movie theaters tried out. And certain things worked pretty well, like the smell of popcorn and things like that. But there were times that that it actually made people sick in the theater when they pumped in these odors. And as far as I know, nobody's done much work with this since. But as I said, the richest, strongest memories come from the richest experiences. So the more, the more inputs you can combine, the better. And there's been some research into actually recreating the environment that surrounded a person, when they had that first experience. That's been really promising as far as understanding all this, I guess. And that makes sense. If you think about, going back to one of your favorite places, sometimes if you, step into your old house where you used to live, the memories just come flooding back.
And so Kelly Smith has shared with us that she attended a session where the speaker put McDonald's French fries on the podium. And after the meeting, a lot of people went to McDonald's for lunch.
That's great. I heard a podcast by, who's the guy that wrote Blink? Malcolm
Gladwell.
Yeah. He's got a podcast, and he talked about McDonald's French fries. Did anybody hear that?
I did. Other people did too.
Yeah.
He's super angry about it.
Well, aren't you? And our kids, they stole it from our kids. Those were the best French fries ever. I remember that. And I just thought I'd just gotten tired of them.
No.
So.
And Autumn has a comment. Some 4D theaters incorporate smell, but for short films. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Thanks, Autumn. I'll have to look into that.
Power of suggestion, Kelly Smith says.
Yeah. But it's very intriguing to me how our brains connect things like that. And how, I don't know if the speaker that put McDonald's French fries on the podium, I don't know if smelling McDonald's French fries now, does that make you go back to that presentation at all? Do you remember things from that when you smell French fries? Maybe we smell French fries often enough that it wouldn't work that way, but very intriguing to me.
She said she wasn't close enough to smell them.
Oh, too bad.
Janice Calm wants to tell us that airlines are contemplating putting smells into the air in the airplane.
I bet they are. They already do. Maybe they could make them nice ones.
Yeah, that's true.
So the brain is like a muscle in that the more you use it, the stronger it gets. Memories work the same way. Most of them disappear within minutes, but those that stay get stronger as time goes on, especially if they are recalled. The more often they're recalled, the stronger they become. And it's a gradual process. Long-term memories can take years to become fixed long-term memories. They go back and forth between different parts of the brain, building and building and building, and finally, eventually, the hippocampus lets go of them and just plants them in the cortex, and they stay there. sort of. Because our brains actually mix the new information that we're bringing in with existing memories. The first thing that your brain does when you see or smell or hear or taste something new is it goes and starts digging around through its file system to see if it recognizes what that is. Have I seen this before? Is it going to kill me? Can I eat it? Can I mate with it? Those kind of questions. And if it finds a similarity, it'll pull that out and present it and say, maybe this thing's this, or this thing's like this. And sometimes these things get a little bit mixed up, but the upshot is that at any time, we only really have an approximate view of reality, because it's always mixing, our brain is always mixing what we're seeing with what we've already seen, already heard, already done. Yeah, that's funny. But the stronger the memory, the less likely it'll be confused with other information in your head. Okay? It's kind of like a flavor, I guess. If a flavor is overwhelming and you add some other little flavor to it, it's not going to affect it so much. So as a presenter, what you can do as far as all of this is concerned is to introduce new information gradually, because that gives people's brains a chance to deal with it. Obviously, in a 45-minute presentation, that's all the time you've got, and if you have a lot of information, you can't really be too gradual about it. So the other thing to do is to repeat it to help your audience remember. Pull that memory back up again, make them look at it, and then in the end, circle back for a recap. Our brains need sleep, and plenty of it. That's when they clean house and they organize everything. They work almost as hard, in fact, when we're asleep as they do when we're awake. So get enough sleep and you'll be a better writer and presenter. You can't do anything about anyone else's sleeping habits, of course, but you can perhaps time your presentation for maximum impact. A very interesting thing to me is that everybody is programmed still for an afternoon nap. 3 o'clock seems to be the time of day when most people need a pick-me-up. Most of us head for a cup of coffee or something, but what we really need is a nap. I guess getting outside and taking a walk works pretty well too. But mostly we don't take naps anymore. Sadly, the day of the siesta is behind us. I think that we should go back to siestas, because I think that was a really civilized thing to do. And now that I've reached a certain age where I'm able to get away with it, I try to take about a 30-minute nap in the afternoon whenever I can. And it really makes a big difference. You know, you can't do that. You can't tell your presentation audience to go take a nap. But what you can do maybe is think about that 3 o'clock hour, and you know, depending on where your audience is in the world, you know, look at their clock, and maybe you can schedule your presentation at some time when it doesn't, at least doesn't run into that, their nap time. And you can avoid this problem altogether. So
you have a comment in the
yes.
chat box from Kelly Schrank. She says she loves naps.
Oh, good. Thanks, Kelly. I do too. I can't make my chat box do anything. You know, this is such a huge subject, and there's so much information, and I was so nervous about cramming too much into this presentation, like I always do, that I really held back here. And and I didn't put in a whole lot of stuff that I wanted to. So I've reached the end of what I have to present, but I am going to do a recap because, you know, repeat to remember, right? But I do want to tell you that that I had a handout which I wanted to have ready for you today, but I decided to add some more stuff to it, mostly because of all the things that I didn't actually put into the presentation. And I will put that together this weekend and get it to Vicki, and she'll send it to you next week, I hope.
You bet.
And it will, great. And it'll be, again, another recap because repeat to remember, but also a bunch of recommendations for further reading, because so much of this stuff is so detailed, and you really need to pull together a bunch of information to make the big connections. So I'm going to recommend a couple of very readable books and some links to some interesting articles, so you can look forward to that. And hopefully everybody will be happy to get out of here a little bit early, but I do apologize for this being shorter than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, we haven't gotten to the question and answers yet.
I know. So that's good. We have time for that.
Yeah, we have lots of time.
So once again, right off the bat, figure out what people want if you can. You know, wing it if you can't, but try to give them what they want. Get their attention and make them like you. Engage their emotions, because that makes for better learning. Right? Emotions equal attention equal learning. You have 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, you're going to have to wake them up again, probably. Multisensory input is better than otherwise. And this goes way back. You know, Richard Clark did studies with e-learning that in the early days of e-learning that established this as a fact. So in your PowerPoint presentations, put a picture up and then talk about the picture. If you've got a whole list of text that needs to go up, maybe make a separate slide for each line of text so that people aren't overwhelmed by that. Remember to establish meaning before dumping a bunch of detail. Repeat to remember, and remember to repeat. Isn't that cute?
That is cute.
Don't forget to take a nap. That's cute too. Take a nap. Questions, comments? Here's me. I would love to hear from you. I'd like feedback. I'd like questions. And this thing tells me that I may be experiencing network connection difficulties. So,
But I hear you fine.
If I drop out, that's why.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
I can still see everything too.
Great.
Hello, may I ask a question?
But of course.
Okay.
Please do.
All right. A former trainer has told us the philosophy: tell people what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you've just told them. And the detractors say, and I'm working more with written communication rather than live presentations, that they don't appreciate that kind of a redundancy, and they feel like it clutters things up. So we have sort of two different points of view on that. Can you speak to that?
Thanks, Ann. We've been hearing that that idea for a long time, and I think it has merit. I think the important thing is how you do it. Something like that, if you can follow a philosophy like that in a subtle way, and I think it can be very constructive. If you hit people over the head with it, it's a very different thing. And I think if you think about it, you'll know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. You know, that it can get stupid really fast. But
Right.
it's really the same thing, I think, that I'm talking about here, as far as repeating to remember. That to me, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's what brought it to mind.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's just a different way of saying that. And I think I just read something yesterday saying that 2 repetitions after the initial offering seems to be really kind of a magic number. Once you hit the 3rd time, you get maximum benefit out of it. You don't necessarily need to do it again after that, but it depends on how complex the information is and who you're talking to and all that stuff.
And
but
I'm
again,
sure
it's
there's,
got to be, sorry.
I was going to just make a comment, and there's probably some significant differences between written communication versus live presentations, because a reader can do the repetition themselves. If they don't understand it, they can go back and reread, and the timing is kind of up to the reader. Whereas when you're sitting in a live presentation, it's just going along in real time, so it's up to the presenter to do the repetitions.
Right, that's a good point. And everyone's reading skills are different from everyone else's too. So it's hard to, what might be perfect for one person just might be terrible drudgery for somebody else who's way ahead of of whatever you're saying. So that is hard, but I think subtlety is the key either way, whether you're writing it or saying it. You can sneak stuff in there, maybe say it in a little bit different way, maybe. And another good way to repeat something is to illustrate it with an example.
Right.
Rather than saying the thing again, talk about something that it's like. And that has several benefits. 1, it's not so boring. And 2, it gives the brain some other piece of information to build that complex memory with.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I find that the subject matter experts are not the right people to review training or anything, the teaching material, because they already know the material, and so their perception of how it's going and what's repetitive isn't the same as your students or the people in your presentation, because they don't know your material, right? So what seems just terribly slow and repetitive to the subject matter experts could be the right pace for your learners.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I was thinking something similar. I was thinking about audience as well, because there are some people that are constant learners, or learning all the time, and they grasp things really quickly. Whereas other people who haven't been in school in a long time, they're going to need that repetition. It just seems like, depending on your audience, how subtle or how direct you could be about your repetition.
Yes.
Good point.
Yep, and even, from one individual to another in your audience. So sometimes you just have to kind of take a middle ground, I guess, or a middle road approach, and then offer more information, like in the form of a handout. Here's where you can go to read more detail about this, for people who want to do that.
So we have some chat box activity.
Okay.
So Donna is telling us a tip that she uses. She recommends taking a memory boosting seminar and then incorporating what you learn there into the presentation. And the key is to help people remember the points that you have made. So I think that's from Donna.
Thanks, Donna. That's I like the sound of that. I've never taken a memory boosting seminar, so I don't know what that would be, but I like the sound of it.
And so Catherine writes, is there a certain, oh, she asks, is there a certain way to lay out the page of information that will make it easier for the recipient to retain the information? Lay out the page.
Oh, yeah. And there are all kinds of considerations around this, aren't there? And a lot of them are the same as you would consider for a presentation. I think mainly you want it to be accessible and not overwhelming. So kind of like a slide full of text, you would want to, if you've got a bunch of complex information, maybe you can spread it out, break it up with visuals, if that makes sense. To me, a huge page of, or any kind of page of complicated text is almost always difficult. And you turn the page and you see another one, and it's just pretty soon you just have the sense of foreboding, like, I can't deal with this, it's too many words. Before you even read any of it, you just see the thing and go, oh no. So again, I think breaking it up with visual elements, pictures, charts, helps, because it just spreads the information out and it gives you some breathing room. There's lots and lots and lots of writing about this, about how to put things on a page that make it easier to access and therefore would create better memories. Does anybody else have anything to add on this? All of us instructional designers.
Let's see, we got a little bit of more activity here. Oh, Donna said that she remembered about the memory improvement class, that because they talked about the smells and sounds.
Oh.
I remembered it because they discussed the use of other senses like sounds and smells to remember items similar to what you did today. And good. Janice says, I'm a longtime computer trainer and presenter. I've been known to make my audience students stand up and do power standing. Good idea. Power stands, like standing like Superman or strongman, increase the good hormones and reduce the bad ones like cortisol. And they are more attentive after the exercise. And then she gives us a link to click for body language and how to be confident.
Oh, that's a good thought. When I first started putting this presentation together, I thought about some things like that, and I meant to put them in. That 10-minute rule that I talked about, that's another thing you could potentially do on that 10-minute mark, is have people stand up and do a Superman pose, or just stand up. If you're running a day-long seminar, obviously you're going to take a break here and there. Just getting up and walking around a little bit can really help wake everybody up. We all know this, we've done this. But those poses are really interesting. There was I watched a TED Talk about it. One of the very popular TED Talks is about this as well. What's that lady's name? Anybody remember?
Which lady?
Cudahy or somebody that talked about power poses, body language and power poses. Well, it's out there. Maybe this is a link to it. I don't know. Ann Cuddy. There it is.
Power poses. So before we wind up, can I do a commercial about our next webinar?
Oh, yeah.
Because it ties in really well with the material that you covered here today, Robert. Our next speaker is going to be Allie Prof, and the title of her presentation is remembering forward, using emotion and storytelling to increase learning retention. So you have a kindred spirit. You and Allie and Robert have kindred spirits. I liked the way that Robert's presentation built on Chuck's presentation, and now Allie's going to build on Robert's presentation. I think we are lucky in our SIG to have so many great speakers to draw from. This is really, I think, a good series.
I do too, and I like the pattern that we're setting up. I see Lauren says that the power pose idea has been debunked. That's news to me. I don't know. It works for me. Maybe I just fool myself.
I like placebos. They work, right?
Some of them do. Well, thanks everyone. This has been fun. I hope you got something out of it. And again, please shoot me an email if you have comments or questions or anything further. And thanks, Vicki. Great job.
I think it's time to turn on our mics and clap for you.
Thank you.
There we go. All right, here's some clapping. Robert, we really appreciate you sharing this with us. This is information I can use like right now. The 10-minute rule I think is awesome. Oh, and I see people typing applause into the chat box. So I'm going to stop.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording and we'll keep talking.